at 80 to 81 degrees north now. So just on that, say that north edge. So everything is going to be in this region right here. And this is Centrum So. So this is that lake I was telling you about. And the caves were described in the valley off here called Grotsdalen. So they had to get from basically this lake where there's a landing strip to Grotsdalen. So there's this area is not populated at all. We were 1,000 miles from the closest people when we were up there. So you have to charter planes and everything. And there's a small landing strip that you can use. So they went up there with their National Geographic funds. There was a small team. There were 5 of them. They took a boat and all their supplies. They used a boat to cross the lake. So it was a lot shallower than it looked on the map. So there was lots of dragging the boat across the lake. Once they get to the other side, they set up a permanent camp. And then they hiked to the caves that were at Grotsdalen. And that was a 47-mile hike. So, you know, you get dropped off in the closest landing strip. You take a boat across a 23-mile long lake, and then you have a 47-mile hike to get to where the caves were. And one thing you're going to see a lot of in this presentation are guns. And that's because there are polar bears. And the difference between polar bears and any other bear is that polar bears are only hunters. If they see an animal, it's lunch. They don't scavenge, they hunt. So if they see you, you are lunch. So we had to carry guns with us at all times. You couldn't even go to the bathroom without taking a gun with you in case there was a polar bear. Anyway, the team got to the valley where the caves were described. So this is them looking up at the cliff. And you can see there's a cave here, here. This is actually a shadow, that's not a cave. The cave up in here, there's another one here, here, and actually a pretty significant cave just around the corner here. So they managed to find the caves. It's pretty challenging to get up to them. The route up is to actually go up this scree slope and across these benches to get to those caves. So it's pretty challenging. They got up there, they got into one of the caves that was described as having flowstone, and they were able to collect samples. So this is Gina with some of the flowstone that they collected. And this flowstone was dated to between 400 and 550,000 years old. So I remember I said that that limit on what we understood about Greenland was about 140,000 years. So you can see we can actually go back just over 500,000 years now. And so that provides a pretty significant window into the paleoclimate of Greenland. So really important information about how the island and the ice could respond, the glaciers could respond to a changing climate. So Gina used this data to get a new grant. She got a SMART award from the Austrian Science Foundation, and she was able to put together a much bigger expedition. So rather than 4 people or 5 people hiking, she was able to actually bring in a bunch of researchers. Because you have to charter the plane to get up there to do the research, it costs as much money to take 4 or 5 people as it does to take 10 people, because you have a weight allowance for the plane. So if you have room for 4 or 5 extra scientists, what you do is you throw 4 or 5 extra scientists on. So I was lucky enough to be invited to join Gina on her trip, return trip in 2019. So this is the expedition team. We're all in yellow shirts here. So here's Gina from the University of Innsbruck at the front. So Gina Mosley, her PhD student. Paul, myself at the University of Akron. Robbie Schoen, I don't know if you guys know Robbie. He is a photographer, a National Geographic photographer, and he's actually Gina's fiance. Chris Blakely, I don't know if any of you guys know Chris Blakely, but he's the safety training officer for Petzl, which was awesome because we got lots of fun Petzl gear to play with. Adam Ignazi and Andrew Saul are both professors at the University of Sheffield, and they focus on glaciology. So they were able to look at the way rocks were being moved around within the valleys to determine what the glacial history was of this area. Paul Smith is a professor and a geologist from the University of Oxford, and he was responsible for mapping this original area back in the early 1990s. And he was a huge wealth of information about the geology of the area, and really amazing to talk to about how these caves could have formed. And then Pete Hodgkinson, he was our medic. We had to have a full-time MD with us because of insurance. We could not get the expedition insured unless we had an emergency room physician with us. So Paul, Andrew, Adam, and myself were the extra bodies that were invited along to fill up the plane for the expedition. And there's 2 other people here that you see aren't wearing t-shirts. And those guys played a pretty important part of the mission. They were the helicopter pilot and the mechanic. So we actually had a dedicated helicopter. There's only 1 helicopter in Greenland, and we got to use it basically for the 3 weeks of our expedition. The helicopter pilot is allowed to spend 6 hours a day flying. So what we would do is have him with us for 3 days on and 3 days off. So we actually had the helicopter for 12 hours a day for 3 days. Then there would be a break and they'd come back. So we basically had helicopter support for about half the time we were there. You need a helicopter for what we were trying to do. It's pretty efficient. I don't think I'll ever ridge walk on my feet again. I'll only do it by helicopter. But you also need a helicopter because of the polar bears, because you actually have to use helicopters to chase them away if they get too aggressive. So that's our pilot, Stig Erik, and our mechanic, Hans Christian. So we basically had a full-time helicopter crew with us, and they actually would stay with us at camp, either in a tent or they would sleep in the helicopter. So to get an expedition to Greenland it's a pretty big challenge because nothing goes up there. There's no infrastructure. As I said, we're 1,000 miles away from the closest people while we were there. And that place that's pretty close, 1,000 miles, is a weather station that gets supplied once every 2 years. So to get our equipment there, this is the year before we left, and this is Gina packing. So each one of these boxes is either equipment or food. And this all got put on a shipping container a year before we ever arrived. And it went on the standard shipping refueling run for Danmarkshavn, which is a weather station up in Greenland. And in addition to all of our supplies and equipment and caving gear, they also needed all the fuel for the helicopter and plane. So in addition to sending up fuel and equipment, they had to send up enough fuel for a dedicated plane, a chartered plane, and also a helicopter. So it was a huge amount of planning a long time in advance. And we were allowed to bring 25 pounds of personal gear with us, and we were staying in the high Arctic. So it was possible that it would get down to about -10 at night. So we had to be prepared for those kind of conditions. In addition, camping out in the field, it took a lot of planning to figure out how to take everything you needed for 25 pounds. So this is just a map to show you where we went. So this is Iceland here, this is Canada, and then this is Greenland. The first thing we did was flew to Reykjavik. So I flew in and met the team in Reykjavik, which is the main airport, the main city in Iceland. From Reykjavik, we took another commercial flight to Akureyri, and Akureyri is the furthest most north airport in Iceland. From Akureyri, we flew to Greenland. So I've just got a larger version of this map over here. So we went from Akureyri to Constable Point. Constable Point actually is a tourist destination in Greenland. It has an airport. It's a pretty basic airport. It's I've got some pictures here. This is taken off from Akureyri Airport, so you can see it's not particularly developed in Iceland. This is flying over the sea. You can see the pack ice. And this is the airstrip at Constable Point. It's quite small. This used to be a US airbase, and the US government no longer wanted it. So they sold it to the Danish government, which is Greenland as a protectorate of the Danish government. So they sold it to Denmark for $1, and it's actually now used for the tourists. So the tourists will fly in and out of Constable Point. This is the airport. It did actually have a Hilton hotel, but it was probably, we reckoned it was a 1-star Hilton hotel because the bathroom was literally a bucket with a garbage bag in it, and they would just take it out, put it on a plane and fly it out. Anyway, this is the plane we rented. So we actually chartered this plane all the way from Iceland to take us all the way north, crossing the sea to Constable Point. At Constable Point, we were able to refuel, and then we went from Constable Point up to Danmarkshavn. So this is the last inhabited place in North Greenland. So we were the furthest north people in Greenland this year, or last year. So flying from Danmarkshavn, Constable Point to Danmarkshavn, the icebergs, pretty impressive geology. This is Danmarkshavn. It's a pretty famous place for exploration of Greenland. Lots of stories, very much like you have in Antarctica, of people getting trapped there for 2 years and boats getting crushed and all kinds of exciting stories. And there's actually a museum there. And the museum is the old huts the explorers used. And the explorers just got up and walked out one day. And it's so cold there, the hut's being preserved. So all their food is still there. Their firewood is still outside. You can still see the original matches. 5 people live here permanently year round. And so that's basically it. So it hardly gets disturbed. These are the shipping containers. So when we got there, one of these was our shipping container that had been sent out the year before. The plane landed. We had all of our gear to move. And the people that lived at Danmarkshavn were kind enough to, this is the baggage handling service at Danmarkshavn Airport. So we get there, we unload the shipping container, you can see all of our boxes, and we start prepping for camp. So this is getting the stoves fueled up, pulling all the gear out, checking everything works. The plane had to take the fuel up to Centrum So for the plane and also the helicopter. So the plane needed enough fuel to get back, and the helicopter needed enough fuel to fly around while it was up there and also get back. So the plane dropped us off, fueled up from fuel that we'd had stashed there, took everything we had out of the back of the plane, filled the back of the plane with fuel. It went up, unloaded the fuel, came back, filled it with fuel again, went back up, unloaded a bunch of fuel, flew back. And then the next day we took this plane back up to Centrum. So while we were at Danmarkshavn, we got to see some polar bears. So you actually start to feel that you're in the Arctic. This was kind of interesting. This is a mama bear, and she had her baby cubs with her, and she was actually teaching them how to hunt birds. So you get these beautiful pictures of these polar bears, and then the very next thing is she jumps up in the air and swipes a bird out of the air and just, you know, tears it to pieces in front of us, and there's blood everywhere. So that was kind of a reminder not to take the bears seriously. And they're big bears. They're bigger than grizzly bears. Anyway, we were at Danmarkshavn. That's our last stop up to Centrum So. So this is flying up to Centrum So on the plane. Just crossing the glaciers. This, I believe, is the second biggest glacier in the world that we crossed, second only to one in Antarctica, and it's about 40 miles across. And the geologists got pretty excited. You see the striations from the movement of the glacier. And then this is Centrum So. So this is that lake that they took the boat across, and this is the landing strip. So this is all permafrost. So this is permanently frozen, and it's basically a delta between 2 rivers. And because of that, it's a nice flat, permanently frozen area so the plane could land. You see the plane coming in. There's some of the fuel that was stashed there so the plane could get back, and also for the helicopter. Pulling everything out of the plane, because then we have to move to the first camp. So this is Centrum So, that lake. And our first camp was in Grotsdalen Valley, which is up here, which is Camp 1, C1. So this was a 47-mile hike, and it was an 8-minute helicopter flight. So definitely more fun with the helicopter. The only trouble is the helicopter could only carry about 300 pounds every time. So we had to do about 10 trips in the helicopter to get everything up there. So you can see all our stuff stashed, ready to be moved. It's flying in the helicopter. You see the pilot again, has got a rifle with him. The polar bears have been known to rip doors off of helicopters to try and get at pilots. So they all have a sidearm and a rifle with them. And this is our first camp. So there was pretty bear aware. This is our food tent where we cooked. This is all our food. The caves are up in these cliffs up in here. And this is our sleeping camp. So it was about 300 feet upwind from where the food was stored. And you notice the tents are all in a straight line. You do that because you don't want to accidentally trap a bear in the middle of the tents. So you want to keep them in a straight line so that the bear can get away easily. The other thing is you can see pools starting to assemble here, and that's a bear fence, and that's something I'd never experienced before. So this is basically, we put these posts in, and about 2 to 3 feet off the ground, we have these strings which are attached to rape alarms. And the idea is if the bear wanders into camp, it will wander through the string and pull on the rape alarm, and the rape alarm will go off. So I think this is Gina, if I can get this to work. See if I can get that. I'm going to get this to play. Let me see. Here we go. Oh. I got to, let me turn the laser off and that might make it work. There we go. Could you guys hear that? I got my speakers on, so I don't know if any of you could hear that. Did you hear it?
No, I couldn't hear it.
All right.
I'm just barely.
I'm a big hungry polar bear.
Heard the beginning of it.
Did you get that? You didn't hear the screaming at the end?
You said she's a big hungry bear, and then it cut out.
You didn't hear the let me turn the volume up.
Didn't hear the alarm.
Let's try that one more
Pretty
time.
cool. Nice presentation. This is so great.
Polar bear.
Yeah, you must have lost the sound somewhere.
Oh, anyway, when she goes through that string, all the rape alarms start going off. And the idea is that if a bear comes into camp, it gives you 2 or 3 seconds to know that there's a bear in camp. Everybody sleeps with a loaded rifle in the tent. And these are high-powered rifles with armor-piercing bullets. And the reason for the armor-piercing bullets is that the hair of the polar bear is hollow, and it acts a little bit like a bulletproof vest. So you have to use these armor-piercing bullets. And we actually had to have polar bear training, including how to shoot these rifles and where to hit the bear. And there's all these rules. You can't just shoot the bears. It's like a 12-step program. You know, if the bear does this, this is your response. And basically, if you get to 11, then you're allowed to start shooting at the bear. Step 9 are these things. These are explosive shells. So it's kind of like a, I don't know if you can see the shell there. But anyway, you can shoot that in front of the bear and try to scare the bear off. It makes a big explosion. Well, not, I mean, it seemed pretty big when I was shooting it, but you made a huge bang right in front of the bear. And they just teach us to be careful that you shoot it in front of the bear and it doesn't land behind the bear and just chase the bear towards you. So the trick is if you have to get up in the night to pee, we had 24 hours of sunlight, so there's no kind of anywhere to hide. That if you go up in the night to pee and you step over the bear fence and you knock the bear fence over and set the alarms off, there are 6 people with loaded rifles in tents behind you. So you have to, I think Robbie stumbled into the bear fence one night and we could hear him cussing and yelling and saying, "It's me, it's me, it's me," because he didn't want to get shot. You actually have to take the, yes, go ahead.
The rifle looks like a Remington 700. Do you know the caliber?
I don't know, as big as my finger.
Okay.
I don't know if that means anything to you. It's bigger than my pinky, I think. Okay, so you also have to take guns to the bathroom. So you can't even walk away from the group without a gun. So this is Robbie Schoen, is known as a famous cave photographer, but he also loves to build latrines. So we called them Schoen thrones. So this is one of his Schoen thrones. So he actually, you can see there's a hole here. He actually found this huge rock which he tumbled down the hill to make a backrest. And he found some sandstone because the sandstone heats up better than the limestone, and so it gets a little bit warmer in the sun for your bottom when you sit on here. It's got a footrest and everything. So we call them Shone Thrones, and they actually had quite a nice view. So this is the view from the Shone Throne across the Grottdalen Valley. So this is the cliff that we came to the first camp for. This is where those caves were described in the 1960s. This is where the team came back in 2015. There is a series of caves you access from this side, and then you have to go up this ramp to access another series of caves up in here. So we were there for a week. We spent the first half of the week on this side and then the second half of the week on that side. It was pretty steep getting up there. As I said, you have to go up this really steep ramp and then across this cliff. So you can see us coming up. And then you traverse around this cliff to get to the cave entrances. You can see some of the entrances here. So we did actually rope in for some of this. Some of it was just exposed walking around the ledges. And this is looking out one of the entrances into the Grottdalen Valley. You could just, when you were at the cave entrance, you could just about see the ice cap up in here. But you can see this amazing valley. It looked like the surface of Mars. I think it's the closest I'll ever get to experiencing Mars. You can see limestone over here as well, but that was about 12 miles away, and we ended up using the helicopter to get over there. These are also limestone cliffs, and there's another valley around the backside of here that we use the helicopter to get to. Maybe I'll put my laser pointer back on. And this is looking out of the cave entrance back down towards camp. So our food tent is actually down around the corner. The Shone Throne is about here. This is actually a insect experiment that one of the professors set up. You see our camp and then our helicopter and our pilot right there. And then this is in the cave. This is Chris cutting some of the flowstone for sample collection, and Gina and Paul sampling. You can see the Grottdalen Valley in the distance. And pretty amazing hoarfrost. So the caves are pretty cold. This cave was -7 degrees centigrade. So I'm not quite sure what that is in Fahrenheit, maybe 22, 23 degrees Fahrenheit. So the walls are below freezing. So when moist air, it's blown out the back of the cave, it actually freezes on the surface and creates this hoarfrost. And some of these frost crystals were about 30 centimeters in length. So pretty impressive. I got to map the caves. This is me sitting outside one of the caves doing the mapping. It was pretty hard to map. I had to calibrate the distos when we got there, and the field lines of because we're so close to the North Pole, the field lines are dipping in at about 89 degrees. So if you can imagine, you're trying to align a disto with a compass bearing, but the field lines of the magnet are actually dipping almost vertically into the ground in front of you. So I think it took like 6 or 7 attempts to get one of the distos calibrated, and I kind of got it down. It was easier for the second one. So that was the first problem. The other was that these caves are so cold that the batteries kept freezing inside. I was using electronic surveying, so I was using TopoDroid on my phone, and the phone would keep freezing. And actually, when I got back, both of my batteries had been trashed because they'd basically been frozen by the caves. But we got to make maps. We discovered 33 new caves while we were there. So this is one of the maps I made. Found some weird microbiological features. This is what appears to be some kind of calcified biofilm, some microbolite on the surface. So this is indicative of how caves were formed. We think there was a microbial involvement, maybe some kind of energy that was promoting precipitation. This is getting up into some of the caves, so we actually had to do some free climbing. Chris is a pretty good climber, and Paul was as well. So this is getting up into Cairn Cave. They rigged routes so we could follow. Again, you can see back down into Grottdalen Valley. We called it Cairn Cave because there was actually a cairn that was built just inside the entrance, and it had a note inside, and that was left behind from the explorers in 1960. And all these caves ended in ice plugs. We think that there is water that is coming in, groundwater that's coming in and freezing and expanding. So you could actually see into these ice plugs, sometimes up to 10 feet, you could actually see passage extending, but it was just frozen solid. So it's likely that these caves are much more extensive, but because of all this ice getting extruded out, you can't go much further. did see some weird things. This is something I noticed in older caves. We think this is indicative of airflow patterns. This is a new type of speleothem that we found that appears to be formed when water freezes on surfaces. So we called it cryogenic frostwork because basically it's formed by freezing and it looks like frostwork. So this is a close-up of it. We took this sample here and my graduate students actually able to get a thin section, and you can actually see how it's built up in layers, and this appears to be from freezing water. And we've done some isotopic analysis of this to show that it's actually formed by freezing. This is Gina back at camp, one of her precious samples. You can see the banding in it, and that banding is just like a regular speleothem from the deposition. So she can use that to trace back in time and look at how the climate has changed. From that camp, the helicopter came out and we did a bunch of ridge walking via I say it's ridge walking. It wasn't really ridge walking because we were doing it all by helicopter. It's the most fun I think I've ever had, or that was also pretty scary because the helicopter pilot, it was kind of like in Star Wars where he'd go into the canyon and go whipping around the canyon. So we got pretty close to cave entrances and we didn't get out the helicopter to see if the cave went until we kind of hovered in the entrance of the cave with the helicopter. And it feels like the blades are like inches from the rock face, and they're probably more like 6 feet from the rock face, but it's pretty scary to be in a helicopter, literally with the nose of the helicopter just in front of the cave entrance. This is looking for caves and canyons. We found a pretty nice canyon in here called PRB. It was named after Chris's dad who died while we were on the expedition. This is the PRB Canyon, and you can see there's lots of dissolution features. Well, there's one right there. And we found this. So we saw this from the helicopter. This is actually while we were trying to figure out if it's a cave. So we actually went around and the helicopter swung in front of this entrance and we just hovered off the deck looking inside. If we saw an ice plug like this in the entrance, there was a pretty good indication that that was a major cave. That's because of the way that the frost would thaw in these bigger caves. So landing the helicopter, hiking up to the cave, we had to put a line in because of this. It looks like water, but this is actually ice and it was super, super slippery. So we put a line across so we could basically scoot across. Look out. And then we get these frost lines. So this frost line is actually cut where you have warm, moist air coming out from the back of the cave, freezing on the ceiling, cooling, becoming drier, and then heading back into the cave. And you get sublimations. You get this perfectly straight line. And if we could see those from the entrance with the helicopter, then we knew that the cave was pretty significant. This is that cave. This cave was about 330 feet long. It was also pretty cold. The coldest part of the cave was minus 17.1 degrees centigrade, which is 1 degree Fahrenheit. So I actually had to survey the cave. Me and Paul surveyed this one. And the cave was 1 degree while we were in there surveying it. It was pretty epic. After we did some surveying in the caves in this canyon, collected some samples, moved camps. This is packing up in the helicopter. And we went to Camp 2. There was a cave that the French had discovered here in the 1970s. So we went to look at that cave. This is looking back towards the Centrum So Lake and some of the geologic features. We found the cave. This is the cave here. It's pretty interesting. It turned out to be the deepest cave in Greenland because it had an entrance here and an entrance up here. So it was actually only 114 feet deep, but that made it the deepest cave in Greenland. It's just nice and big inside. There was some samples that Gina could collect, but it wasn't particularly exciting. So to cheer everybody up, Gina decided she'd make a strudel. So it's an Austrian dish. Gina's English, British English. So she's not Austrian and her graduate student is Austrian. So this is his approval of her attempt to make strudel on a campfire. We packed back up, moved the helicopter, and what we decided to do was return to the PRB Valley where we found Kate's Cove, which was the big cave, because there were plenty of caves in that area. I think we found 61 solution features. That's where the majority of the actual caves that we discovered were. So back up to the PRB Canyon, and we actually camped in the canyon. So this is the camp. We camped just above a stream. We didn't want to camp down by the stream. We were about 200 feet above the river of the canyon. And the reason for that is if a polar bear wandered in, he wouldn't have a way to get out except going through us. So we wanted to be away from him. Setting up camp. There wasn't a lot of water here. There was a small snowfield up here that was melting. So there was a little trickle of water. So we actually engineered kind of a sink and a faucet. So we actually had running water at camp, which was nice. Shone throne. This is the picture. The PRB Valley here is going up around here. But I actually took a picture of this. I was sitting on the toilet when I took the picture. I hope I don't offend anyone. This is the PRB Canyon down here. But I just thought it was the most spectacular view I've ever had from a toilet in my life. This is hiking the PRB Canyon. So you can see it was pretty rugged, but there were cave features everywhere. Checking some out, climbing up into some. While a team was working in the PRB Canyon, we actually went with the helicopter pilot to check out another canyon that he discovered. And I was in the helicopter when we came swinging around this corner, and I saw this entrance. So we landed the helicopter and walked up, and this is a nice big entrance that we found. Again, lots of frost. This cave was about minus 11 degrees centigrade. So I think it's what, minus 15, 16 degrees. And it had this crawl here was completely choked. I dug this crawl out when we discovered the cave, and we popped in the other side. And we actually popped in underneath this ice here. So you can see kind of this bubble of ice, and it's perfectly clear. You can see into it about 10 feet, and you can see cave going into the distance. But this is ice that's being extruded from the cave. And at some point, the ice came in contact with this lump of rock here, and because the rock is colder than the ice, it's freezing and actually stuck to the ice itself. And you can see it's actually being picked up and transported by the ice as the ice is getting pushed out of the cave. And this is just, it's a super weird thing. It literally looks like you're looking up into a huge soap bubble. The edge of it is like down in here. So you're looking up to this huge soap bubble, but it's actually ice, and you can see in the blackness here that keeps going into the caves under a huge amount of pressure and incredibly clean water for it to be that clear. And so this cave had 2 ice plugs in it, one near the entrance and then this one at the back, and it had some really nice frost in it. Another part of the canyon, Paul and I found this other cave. This is looking up to the entrance. This one was pretty long. This was at 300 feet. And one of the deeper caves, again, lots of ice in the entrance, pretty spectacular. And then looking across the valley here, you can see this ledge of limestone here. We took the helicopter, went over, and we found this cliff face here. So there's a cave here, and around the back side, there was another cave. And it turned out that cave and this cave are probably connected to each other by a dig. We got within about 50 feet of connecting the 2 caves, but it was a serious dig, and it was about 10 degrees Fahrenheit inside the cave, so we really didn't feel like digging through. Again, you can see that characteristic frost line when you get one of these big caves. Pretty impressive ice. They had hexagonal ice in here, so it was like dinner plates sticking out, and Robbie unfortunately didn't spot them and didn't get photos of them, and I spotted them but didn't think to get photos. But they're about the size of dinner plates, and they stick straight out from the side of the rock. And you only get that when you have very stable air at minus 3 degrees centigrade. It's phenomenal how hexagonal ice crystals form. So it indicates that there's really super stable air at the contact between these 2 layers. Again, nice kind of swirly stuff showing that probably they formed when this area was wet. Okay, so science, I'm sorry, that took a long time. So science, what did we find? I think Gina got something like 63 samples, including some really important ones. I think she took back 300 kilograms of rocks. She ended up taking back so many kilograms of rocks that the only way she could take the important rock with her back to Innsbruck on the plane was for us to leave all our stuff behind to get shipped back by boat. So I sacrificed my boots for 8 months so that Gina could get her rock samples home. My boots came back on a boat. Some kind of weird biology. These are some iron oxide deposits. This is a contact between two limestone beds. This upper limestone bed rich in iron, the lower limestone bed rich in organic material. We think where they meet, they promote microbial growth. So this is just some close-up of the iron. These, you may not have seen anything like this before. I've seen these in tropical areas. This is a photo I took in Borneo. These are called Spitzcairn or photocairn, and they're actually caused by sunlight. So they actually point directly towards sunlight. You find them in dark areas of the cave. They're created by photosynthetic bacteria that are chewing away at the rock. They were only thought to form in tropical regions, but we actually found them in Greenland, suggesting that whatever the conditions that support it in Borneo, which were thought to be high organics and high humidity, are being satisfied within Greenland. So we're looking into what we believe the chemistries are that allow it to happen under this very dry, very cold, very nutrient limited area compared to Borneo. And Borneo, this has got, like, you know, tropical rainforest above it. Here, you know, you get excited if you see a plant. Weird photosynthetic stuff. This was in the dark zone of a cave, so it was completely dark, but it caught our attention because it was bright green. It's actually on a bird pellet, so there are birds of prey that will nest in these caves with their to produce their offspring. So they'll consume an animal and then hack up this bird pellet. And we found this green material in the bird pellet. The bird pellets are enriched in nitrogen and phosphorus, and we think it's actually able to support photosynthetic algae. So this is the algae under the microscope, and then the photosynthetic pigments of the algae. And this algae was growing at -7 degrees centigrade in a completely dark zone. So we think that it's actually using reflected light for photosynthesis. And this is a group that's common in the Arctic, but it hadn't been, common in the Antarctic that hadn't been described in the Arctic before. So that was a pretty exciting find. Cave records, we explored the world's most northerly cave. We mapped the longest cave in Greenland. We mapped the deepest cave in Greenland, and we also mapped the world's coldest cave. This is from the plane heading back. Plane came and got us, and we got to head back to Denmarkshaven and then back to Reykjavik. And this is Gina with her 2 boxes of samples that we all had to leave our stuff behind for. And so all the thanks for putting this expedition together go to Gina, who organized it, curated it, got everybody to write everything up. And it was a pretty fabulous thing to be part of, and I really do appreciate the opportunity. So yeah, I think I'm going to turn my pen off to stop the sharing. See if we can do that.
That's pretty amazing stuff. What a trip.
Yeah. I don't know how to.
To
Sorry. Yeah, I'm trying.
You just go up to the top and.
It's frozen on me. There we go.
Maybe I can turn you off.
Yeah, can you turn me off?